And I do believe that we have rotten politics, and I'm not using that as an exaggeration.
Hey everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be having a look at the SNP's obvious dislike of England. Now, before I go any further, I would like to say this isn't aimed at all Scottish people. This is just aimed at the SNP supporters, the supposed nationalists. Now, I was actually thinking the other day, you may already know, I get a lot of stick on my SNP videos from SNP nutjobs, who seem to be some of the most hateful people I have ever had the misfortune of reading text messages from. And I was wondering, I can understand dislike of England because of our historic past. Granted, I understand that, but I haven't personally hurt any Scottish person, and I don't know any of my family members or any of my friends that have. So I was wondering why they still hate us with a passion. Well, it seems that I found an article that suggests why, and you will be disgusted to find out why. Now, this is an article in the Scotsman, and it's titled "Nationalist Propaganda Disguised as History for School Children is Worrying Sign About Where Scotland is Heading." Now, I will forgive him for the nationalist side of things. The SNP are as far from nationalist as you can possibly get, unless you want to class nationalist as getting independence to then give it to a master that calls themselves an empire. Yeah, not very nationalist, is it? But anyway, let's read this article and see what this Brian Wilson's saying from the Scotsman. One expects to find deluded claims and distortions on the fringes of debate perpetrated by people with allegiances designated by flags or the abuse they hurl on Twitter. Sticks and stones. Sticks and stones. I'm sick of this, me now. When the same stuff appears as a publication of the Scottish Government with the intention of inculcating it into the mind of the young, then it needs to be taken seriously. In fact, very seriously. The story of Education Scotland's timeline leading to the establishment of the devolved Parliament in 1999 was accompanied this week by horrified quotes from Scottish historians, not English historians, Scottish historians, regardless of their political persuasions. Are we ready for what they've said? First one is Sir Thomas Devine. He denounced it as arrant propaganda and dangerous nonsense. Then you've got Professor Chris Watley of Dundee University, and he described it as a perversion of history, frightening as it was blatantly political and clearly designed to support the cause of Scottish independence. I would actually say clearly designed to support the cause of hating everything English. Glaring falsehoods are included, like Churchill sending English troops to suppress, I quote, a major revolution in Glasgow, fitted into a more general theme of oppression and subjugation from 1296 onwards. Needless to say, all inconvenient evidence to the contrary was excluded. The Enlightenment, never heard of it. Slavery, Scotland's role in the empire, the suffering of working people, our bairns don't need to be bothered with that kind of thing. You see where we're going with this? They're teaching the children basically to hate England and to hate being part of the Union. How is this not treachery at this point? There is a section which directly links 20th century radicalism and nationalism, as if the two went hand in hand. Just proves how idiotic they are then, doesn't it? Which they most certainly did not. Sadly, there is no space for the dalliance between fascism and nationalism, perhaps with a Hugh McDermott poem thrown in. Used for schools for 2 years. On Wednesday, this despicable, dishonest, crude propagandist timeline was removed from the Education Scotland website, an admission of guilt. A spokesman for Education Scotland said primly that it was to ensure, are we ready for this? Our resource is not open to misunderstanding or misinterpretation. You mean your lies? Yeah, right. However, the more sinister element of this story is not what emerged this week. It is that tension was first drawn to the timeline 2 years ago, but it has continued to be used in Scottish schools in spite, or because, of the fact it was arrant propaganda and blatantly political. At that time, another Scottish historian, Gordon Barclay, wrote about it in the Scottish Affairs Journal and submitted freedom of information requests about who wrote it, whether it was approved by ministers, and so on. All questions were blanked with the familiar contempt for freedom of information legislation. If there was any possibility the Education Secretary, John Swinney, his advisors and the whole of Education Scotland did not know before then that they were publishers of a mendacious piece of propaganda under the guise of children's education, they certainly knew it then. Nothing was done to amend or remove it until this week. We have no idea of the extent of which the timeline was propagated in the Scotland schools as encouraged by Education Scotland. At this point, I'd like to ask any Scottish Unionists or Scottish nationalists, actual nationalists, how long this sort of thing has been taught in your schools. I would like to know. If you've got any information on it, please let me know. You can join the Discord and let me know in there. That'd be the easiest way. If you want to find out how to join the Discord, there's a link in the description. Just click that and it'll explain everything you need to do. Come and say hi away from the YouTube. I'd like to know how long they've been teaching the propaganda in Scottish schools as well, to be honest. I suppose that will depend on the intelligence and disposition of individual teachers, but we do know that for 2 years it has been the intention of Mr. Swinney and his cohorts that this is how Scottish history is taught to teenagers of voting age. You hear that? Voting age. It may be pointless to expect Holyrood, far less Scotland's broadcasters, to investigate anything which inconveniences the regime, but anyone who thinks that falsification of history as propaganda is a minor matter fails to recognise the direction in which Scotland is being led, and it isn't healthy. The questions must be persisted with. Incidentally, for further evidence of why history is dangerous in nationalist hands, look no further than the SNP's own website. As may be remembered, the ink was hardly dry on the Alex Salmond charge sheet when he was entirely written out of the party's history, while then Deputy Leader Nicola Sturgeon had spearheaded the pro-independence campaign in 2014. Poor Alex no longer exists. Makes you wonder if poor Alex was attacked on purpose, knowing he'd done nothing wrong, to remove him from power. So I don't know, ankle biter, wee fished lips Sturgeon could take over maybe? I feel confident that Peter Murrell must have been in another room or perhaps taken a shower when that audacious rewriting of history was agreed upon, all for the national cause, party and government as one. Now you can see, everyone, everything that we've been suspecting for years, i.e. Scotland are teaching their children to hate us at schools, paid for by the British taxpayer I might add, here is the proof. And this isn't coming from an English person, it isn't coming from the government, it's coming from the Scotsman news article by a Scottish person. So before you start moaning SNP and saying it's not true, talk to your own people first, because it seems you're not in full agreement anymore. In regards to them actually teaching about certain aspects, let's just pick apart one of them, shall we? One of them is Churchill sending English troops to suppress a major revolution in Glasgow. Now what that actually means, what that is referring to, is the St George's Square uprising. What the SNP and schools in Scotland are teaching is that the British sent military troops, i.e. Churchill, military troops and tanks, listening, tanks, to quell the uprising. This is absolute fabrication. For one, there were no tanks in Scotland at the time, so that's thrown out of the water. They did say that they come back with something since then and said there was one tank that was there on exhibition. Let me just tell you this, that tank left the year before the St George's Square incident. So this is absolute rubbish from start to finish, and yet it's being taught in schools. Did you notice how it was to teenagers that were of voting age? This is why I'm 100% against children voting, because they listen to their teachers and peers and they're being lied to by their teachers and peers. But anyway, I'd like to know your opinion on this. Do you think this is the reason why a lot of SNP still hate us? Because I've never done anything to a Scotch person. I've never done anything to Scotland in general. In fact, I have defended them numerous times throughout my life and will continue to do so. However, the amount of hate that are coming towards people like myself with channels that like to pick up on things that the SNP are doing is astronomical. Not that I give two tosses, to be honest. Couldn't care less about the SNP or SNP voters. You're insignificant in my opinion. But it just shows where the hatred is coming from, doesn't it? If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, share it out, everyone. Let's wind up a few SNP muppets, and I'll see you on the next one.